Hey, get in, fellas. We're going back to therapy. Welcome to session 5. Oh, man, what a lovely round number. And as we continue to celebrate our heroes in the month of May, we are very happy to have on Nurse Sam Hunt, who refers to himself as Murse Sam on the social medias, talking about the emotional toll and the fun and less fun parts of being a young nurse out in the work world. Thinking about young people and their navigating of life, we're going to start the show talking about hustle culture, a big thing these days in terms of pushing yourself and the grind, never stopping attitude and how that can impact us negative ways. Then we'll talk with Sam more about his nursing career and how he balances his success on social media with his day-to-day life as a nurse. And we will wrap with the Bromotions Hall of Fame with famous 1800s poet Walt Whitman. This is our second to last episode of Heroes Month, so let's keep on appreciating these people. For this episode, let's go. What's up, fellas? Welcome back. And this week, before we chat with our boy Murse Sam, we're diving into something that I think most men in their 20s these days, and honestly, guys like us, even beyond in their 30s, are grappling with, and that's navigating hustle culture. Feels like everywhere you look, there's this message pushing you to constantly be grinding, constantly be productive, always be striving for more. I know I've felt this. I felt it during this podcast production, before this in other ways. Really common for those of us who want to succeed and achieve in life. Glorifying this side hustle. A lot of people are going to be working and driving for a rideshare app, trying to launch an Etsy store during spare hours. Constantly feeling like you need to be networking or building your brand is really overtaking the mental health of Generation Z, and even more on the ones up and coming. Can be extremely intense when you're in your early career trying to establish yourself. You see people online touting their multiple income streams and their jam-packed schedules, guys who work full-time, run a podcast, flip furniture on the weekends, right? And it's easy to feel like you're not doing enough if you're not operating at that same relentless pace. We see it in these endless productivity hacks we see on Instagram. That guy who got famous recently for telling us about his 5 a.m. morning routine and teaching us how to optimize every minute of our days. And that subtle implication that taking a day off or just relaxing is somehow a sign of weakness, that gets to us, guys. It's this pervasive idea that our worth is tied directly to our output and our busyness. We don't get taught how to just be, how to do nothing. So we think about scrolling on Instagram and seeing everyone else's success stories, and it's very easy to see how that can make us feel like our own progress is lagging. We pay for this in the long term, guys. Psychologically, that relentless pursuit of hustle and ambition triggers our fight or flight response on this chronic low grade level. So you might not notice it, but not relaxing, not taking time for yourself leads to a dysregulated nervous system. So we're constantly pushing, constantly feeling that low level of stress. It leads to increased anxiety. That's what drives that feeling of comparison, feeling that we need to be doing more. When we have that constant low grade level of stress, you've heard this, guys, it impacts our immune system, makes us more likely to get sick. And for people who have it really, really bad, it increases autoimmune disease risk and other poor health outcomes like cancer. So this constant comparison, in general, this biologic and psychologic overlay, it inhibits our brain's reward pathway. So if you only get positive emotions from hitting certain ambitious marks or only getting it from external validation. So we do all these things so that we can show others we look cool, we drive a cool car, we have something we can be proud of, that we're never truly satisfied, and therefore increasing our risk of emptiness and feeling overall dissatisfied in our life, and likely even leading to depression. So how can we counteract this? What can we do about it? And counteracting hustle culture takes a conscious shift towards self-compassion, recognizing that it's okay to not be constantly productive and treating yourself with the same understanding of a friend who would offer you the same advice that you'd likely give to them, but aren't as good at giving to yourself. Also, practicing mindfulness can be really helpful, trying to be present in the moment so that we can work on just being or doing nothing, and not judging ourselves or beating ourselves up for it. Just to be able to simply detach, not needing to be productive, and appreciate the value of simply being in a space and being with people and not thinking about what comes next. I harp a lot on setting values-based goals. Okay? People value money, they value nice things, but it can't be all we value. Relationships, your own well-being, personal growth and not just chasing those external markers of success will lead to more purpose, fulfillment. When your actions align with your core values, you feel more self-worth intrinsically. So we are not feeling as empty when we're only seeking that external validation. And this is great way when you feel that and you feel that connection with people to remind yourself that this is really what life is about. And as we talk with our boy Murse Sam later, his first year in his career in the operating room as a nurse, 24-year-old who also pushes himself on social media, to which he does a great job. It's going to be interesting to hear his perspective as he navigates both those worlds and himself very much in hustle culture. How can I be a young person trying to succeed in my field, succeed on the internet, succeed with my friends, and succeed with dating? There's a lot in our boy. We look forward to hearing how he talks about it. Ultimately, navigating hustle culture is about recognizing those underpinnings psychologically and biologically and consciously choosing a different path rooted in self-acceptance, mindfulness, and a definition of success that prioritizes well-being and our values over name recognition and over money. It's about building a resilient sense of self that isn't solely contingent on external achievements and remembering that sometimes the most productive thing you can do is nothing at all. And speaking of navigating these intense pressures of the early stages of life in a demanding career, we'll be right back after the break to talk to our boy, Nurse Sam Hunt. All right, Samuel, bright and early on a Saturday morning, can you start our listeners off with a vocal exercise to get us warmed up and prepped?
Yeah, they taught me this back in freshman year choir. I had a do re mi fa sol la ti do.
The hills are alive with the sound of music. Thanks for your willingness, young buck, to get up here and chat with me so early in the morning. So, guys, we are continuing Heroes Appreciation Month on the pod with another wave of heroes that during COVID got a lot of love, and let's make sure we not drop it off, and that is nurses. We are lucky to have with us Sam Hunt today. He is an operating room nurse based out of Indianapolis, Indiana, where he grew up. You can see him repping his Hoosier swag as he went to IU for undergrad. And as a result, is of course a big Indianapolis sports fan as his Pacers look to hang in these NBA playoffs. Right after this, Sam's getting ready to go hoop with his boys. Sam, thank you for being with us.
Steven, thank you for having me.
I was looking for a male nurse to come on and talk about existing in a world where men are not the majority. And Sam has a social media account called Murse Sam, where he leans into some of the funny but also serious parts of being a young nurse. Sam, talk about that.
Yeah, so I started Murse Sam about a couple months ago. I had a company reach out to me actually, and they were interested in me sharing a different side of my TikTok, which was my medical profession. And although I lost ties with the company, I continued to make content that, I felt related to a certain audience, which is my fellow nurses, and I wanted to kind of bring a comedic relief, yet relatable and understanding to the field I'm in.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we had them on here. Sam, was this like Figs who'd reached out to you?
Yeah, it was a company just wanting me to promote their studying tools, and they wanted me to target the nursing audience. And I worked for them a couple months, and we fell off, but account's going strong.
Number one question you'd have for a nurse is, does Figs, these are scrubs, this is a brand of scrubs for any non-medical people in the audience, far and away the most popular and comfortable scrubs for people who live in the hospital. Do they even have a rival? Just like the shitty ones they give you at the hospital?
Yeah, they I don't even have a good answer to that.
Yeah, it's funny because it tells you right there that not even being able to think of another brand besides shitty hospital ones and Figs tells you that they're doing pretty damn good. We got to check them for a monopoly.
I mean, they had a great commercial for Nurses Week, actually one of the best commercials I've ever seen. And I think that just continues to solidify their dominance in the scrub world.
Yeah, Sam, thanks for making sure to bring that up. That May 6th was National Nurses Day and Nurses Week that week. So was the same day and week as Teachers Appreciation Week. It fell between firefighters and police officers. Something about early May. Maybe it's the dawn of spring, flowers in the air that makes us feel appreciative.
That's what I'm thinking.
So, start us off here, Sam. As a young man, what had you interested in or deciding to go into nursing?
Yeah, so the original plan, I went into Indiana University as a pre-med student, right? Uh,
I
that's the
went to
best
Ohio
college.
State, Sam. I don't know if we covered that.
Yeah, the best Big Ten school right here. Went into IU as a pre-med student, and my whole freshman year was pre-med driven. The only issue is organic chemistry was my arch nemesis. Realistically, I couldn't get above a B. And let's be honest, most med schools, I'm not going to be able to get in with a B in Orgo. So I made the executive decision after my freshman year, which was COVID, by the way, to change to nursing. After I got sent home, did a lot of soul searching, decided what I wanted, what I didn't, and ultimately I thought the most realistic path for me to achieve my goals, which is healthcare, would be nursing. I'm surrounded by nurses in my family. My mom was a nurse practitioner. My aunt's a nurse practitioner. My grandma was a nurse. There's nurses all around me. Ultimately, they make a huge difference in a patient's outcome, and the avenues that I can do through nursing are just astronomical. I can do so many things with.
It's true. Being so young in your career, you're right. Nursing, and maybe you want to become an NP or anything like that in the future. It certainly leaves the doors open. Like you said, the goal was healthcare. Why?
I've always been drawn to helping people, making them feel better. And in terms of being there for a patient when they're at their lowest and making sure that, there is a friendly face, there is a good smile, there's a sense of humor, positivity around them. That's all you can ask for. And I felt like that was something I could help give.
Yeah, you talked about having so much family that have been in nursing and have been in the healthcare field in general. What are some of the traits that you admire in those strong women that you've had in your life?
Yeah, the independence of those women are just off the charts. I love their drive, their constant search to improve, even I mean, my mom and her sister have been at this for like 20 plus years, and they are constantly trying to improve, trying to grow, and trying to improve patient care and outcomes.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, we know how often nurses are leading the charge around outcomes and patient safety in the hospital settings. And sure, from my many years of experience, that was often the case. Now you're a year in to your career as a OR nurse after finishing school. Can you walk us through your coffee or caffeine regimen throughout a shift? What's that look like?
Steven, you're gonna think I'm crazy. Usually my coffee slash caffeine regimen includes zero. I'm running on straight water almost 99% of the time. A couple times I'll throw in a Celsius, but other than that, we are straight water. We are like a steam engine. We just keep going.
Okay, when I met Sam, guys, he did seem young and enthusiastic and full of life. And you know what, Sam? I hope you can continue that no caffeine lifestyle. I don't want to say age is gonna catch up with you. I don't know. I don't know. But whew, that was surprising. I had that
Yeah.
coffee joke, that nurse caffeine joke all queued up, and that is impressive, my dude. That is impressive. He's just like this, guys. He's just smiling. Being a male in a field that is generally considered female, has that been noticeable? Like, what kind of experiences have you had early on that have drawn attention to that?
Unfortunately, there's a stigma about men in nursing. And it's always, you get these questions like, oh, why'd you stop there? When's med school? And, it's kind of degrading in a way to the guys who do choose nursing as a field. And, you know, although that's just some of the challenges I've had, I've also had great things. I've met a lot of great people. I mean, I graduated with 7 guys in my 80-person cohort from IU. And it seems like all the guys will be furthering their education. I think CRNA is very heavy dominated on that. And I think that's what I've learned. I mean, I feel like most of the guys, we just want to get in there, get it done, and usually, hopefully, no drama. That's what we bring.
Do you think there's any sorts of like stereotypes about men who go into nursing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, being in a fraternity, especially, there were a lot of guys who weren't receptive to the idea that I could possibly be in a female dominated field, right? I'm a straight man, but there are lots of questions, like even online on these accounts where people do think I'm gay, which there isn't anything wrong with that. But that's the stereotype that drives these stigmas.
It's interesting, Sam. So the episode a couple before yours, I did had a group of my friends on that are teachers, male teachers, and one of my friends was a kindergarten teacher, and it was the same thing. He's like, I think it shocked people to learn that I was a straight male, and you have a straight male as a kindergarten teacher. Like, what kind of creep is that? Versus it tells you as a society how strongly rooted that stereotype of men not being caregivers, men not being good parents, men not being emotionally attuned. And considering more than half the women in medical, or more than half the people in medical school these days are women, I mean, we'd like to hope that all that stuff's going by the wayside.
I agree. I really hope the stigma that a straight man can't be in these female dominated fields changes because ultimately we're just trying to help.
Do you think there's certain fields, you talked about CRNA, do you think there's certain specialties or fields that male nurses gravitate towards?
Based on my small sample size and the people I've worked with, it seems like most of the guys that I've seen personally are using nursing as a stepping stone. And I see that as a great avenue, right? They put in their time in whatever specialty they're doing, and they're either going to gravitate towards those high level like CRNA positions or nurse practitioner. And I think that's what I've noticed most clearly. That's what it seems like to me.
Sam, it's interesting. So I usually use a part of the interview to come up with the opening topic for the show, 5 to 10 minutes on something to educate and work on skills around. And so for you, age, your profession, the kind of hustling you do on social media, I'm doing a segment on hustle culture. So it sounds like what you see from the men who go into nursing is most of them aren't stopping there. They're not satisfied there. They're going to keep hustling. They're going to do more. Pros and cons, my dude.
I agree. I see a lot of the guys are honestly, it could be due to the stigmas that are around that, right? Because let's be honest, you see just a regular bedside nurse, those stereotypes are probably going to be more critical. And a lot of people can't handle that. And maybe say you just jump up, right, to an NPCRNA. I feel like the stereotypes start to fall off a little bit because, oh, wow, like you have a higher responsibility and higher level of education in healthcare.
Higher salary.
That's it.
And okay, here's a generational gap question. Are you a Scrubs fan?
Scrubs, like,
The TV show.
well,
God,
I've
I'm
never
old,
seen
man.
it.
I'm old. Okay, look, it's as relevant. It's good. It is. Okay, let me go back. Are you a Ted Lasso fan?
I do know who Ted Lasso is. I
I mean,
haven't
who? It's
watched
TV
any.
show, a fictional character,
Wait, is that the soccer star?
soccer show.
Okay. I've seen a
Yes.
couple episodes. Yep. My
Okay,
parents
okay.
love
Well, either way, so there's an episode of Scrubs where Donald Faison, who's Turk, it gets his wife, Carla, who's a nurse, information about going to NP school. And he says to her, where, you could do this so you could be more than just a nurse. And like, whoo, it gets ugly. It gets
I like
ugly for your boy. So, it made me think about that when you were talking about that stigma of a career in bedside nursing certainly looks one way compared to moving on and having an advanced degree. Sam, it's a great gut check time for you here because you've been in the field now for 1 whole year. What kind of advice would you give yourself from this time right now to Sam at this time last year?
Yeah, I think, especially me, I always expect to know everything. There is no like I can't like be delayed in my learning process. I should know it right off the bat. And that's something I gotta throw out the window because that's unrealistic. I came in hoping to make an impact, but I mean, you don't know what you don't know. And I didn't know anything in the operating room. And I still would not say operate as an independent employee, but there are still times that I need to ask questions. And one of the biggest pieces of advice I'd give myself, right? Don't be afraid to ask questions because a confident nurse is a dangerous nurse.
Dangerous, exactly, Sam. When I was working with interns and medical students and younger residents in my training, I would say ask every question once. There are a lot, there are lives on the lines here. Do you think that you guys do any? Because I think healthcare is hierarchical, stressful, pressure packed. Do you think that the environments you've been in have been fostered to allow you to be comfortable asking questions?
I think yes and no, right? Because especially in the operating room, we always say we're trying to tame the dragon, and you don't want to see the dragon come out, which is the surgeon. So I think there are instances outside of the actual procedure when it isn't as intense that I can ask questions. But early on, there was big learning curve. Like I was struggling at times to really figure out what was going on. I tried to make myself 1% better every day, but ultimately there were some days I had no idea what was going on. I wasn't able to get the questions answered that I needed, and I would go home feeling confused.
You said you do mostly your neurosurgeon ortho. Is that where
Yeah,
you tend to
that's
hang
that's
out?
my special.
Yeah. What percentage of the surgeons are dragons or could be dragons if the situation played out that way?
60% can be dragons.
Yeah, honestly, I wonder if it'd be higher in general surgery.
I can think off the top of my head right now with my hospital, at least 3 people that I know for sure snap in general surgery. Worse than
Speaking of which, man, I mean the we know the operating room, whether it be in TV shows, movies, it can be a high stakes environment. Like, can you describe what the emotional atmosphere feels like in an OR for
yeah,
our
I would
guests?
say more so in, like, the high pressure situations in neuro, for example, right? We're more concerned about that than orthopedics, let's be honest, right? Orthopedics, it's more so they get upset about time, right? They want it to be fast, very quick, which is understandable because, we're not dealing with vital arteries, we're not dealing with, any sort of intracranial pressure. For example, I'm thinking of high pressure craniotomies that we do. And those can get intense really fast when replacing shunts. It's usually the neurosurgeon, and I gotta give props to our neurosurgeons where I work. They really are pretty calm for what they're dealing with. They really are. They're very particular, which I would be too if I was working on the brain. If you don't have the right instrument, and I mean any sort of width or length discrepancy from what they want, they need it. Fine. It's just very particular, but very few times they blow their gasket.
All right, so are you like setting up the trays and everything before the procedures?
Yeah, so in terms of what I do, my responsibilities within the OR, I am the surgeon's bitch inside and outside the room. So we have circulating and we have scrubbing. So circulating, I pick up the patient, I chart, I prep, I basically get everything they need outside the room. Scrubbing, we all know what scrubbing is. We've seen it in TV. I pass the instruments, make
Don't
sure they
touch me,
have
I'm sterile.
exactly sterile field. I know it by heart by now. And yeah, that those are my responsibilities in the
So I'm interested, Sam. You guys are really busy throughout the day. One case ends, you're cleaning the room, you're flipping that room, probably going to another room for your next procedure. What happens in a tough case? Are you able to slow down? Is there time to get emotional support in cases where things are going badly or have gone badly?
Yeah, fortunately for me, I've only been in a couple bad cases where the outcome wasn't what we were anticipating. In terms of emotional support, I think they offer it at my hospital. It definitely, it's an issue. I am pretty desensitized to everything at this point. There's nothing that really phases me, and that's kind of concerning. If I was trying to describe this to my friends who are not in the healthcare field, and I was basically saying like if we had someone right next to us, right, just drop dead, I probably wouldn't be fazed by it. I'd check a pulse, and if they're not breathing, start CPR, and it's a robotic mechanism at that point, right? Like it doesn't phase me, and that's a little scary because I don't know what that line is between emotional that I should feel something and then desensitized.
Yeah, Sam, it's definitely something you improve on as you go. It's I've been in a lot of seen a lot of patients, seen a lot of sticky situations, and it's like, how do you retain the humanity in situations that call for it, even when you're on the clock, like we are in healthcare? For our audience, man, if you've been here the last few weeks, you've heard that firefighters have a systematic way of dealing with tough calls. Police officers have a systematic way of getting everybody together and debriefing. I'll tell you guys, we don't have that in healthcare for the most part. We do M&M, morbidity and mortality conferences, which is much more like what went wrong, how do we cover our ass and make sure stuff like that basically says who's the problem. Sure, you might have, support within your social group or a little thing here and there, but we are so busy that is moving so fast that even if something goes wrong, there is not really time to pause. So take that for, its perspective, everybody who's listening. On that note, like, what do you think, some of those unspoken, if we're not talking about it, what are those emotional challenges that you face?
Yeah, I think, really adapting and trying to understand why some of these healthcare professionals, surgeons, anesthesia, they move on so fast, right? It's kind of, we lose one, it's next man up. There's no time to grieve. And I think, learning as a nurse who really hadn't been exposed to that type of that death, that was a big learning curve for me as well. Like kind of trying to be like, oh, like why are we not trying to understand what just happened? We just send them, body bag them, send them to ICU. They probably don't make it in the ICU. And luckily those cases are far and few between. We don't get that many trauma cases, but the ones we do, wouldn't say have very high success rate in all normality. It's usually about, I feel like 50, 60% that they do live. And that's scary to think about when you get called in to do those massive blood transfusions.
Knowing the odds may be against you. It's knowing that something's maybe out of your control. And you talk about that dragon. I mean, that's what drives surgeons to be so intense is they want to control the outcome of the situation they're in. They want to control their schedule. They want the outcomes to be good, and surgeons have to believe that it's going to go well, or else they can't,
Absolutely.
won't be able to do what they need to do.
Absolutely. And I think that is also part of the stubbornness most surgeons have. They've made it this far doing exactly what they've done. Why change, right? And unfortunately, some of them, they need kind of a reminder of where they are and what the patient is, but they have final say. And, usually it works out, but sometimes it doesn't.
This is very stressful. You're navigating a lot of newness in your life as a young male. What do you do to manage the emotional toll of the work?
Yeah, first off, love basketball, right? That is my stress relief, basketball. Ultimately, always. Always has, always will be. Doing my physical exercise, that is just a non-negotiable for me. I have to, or else it does. It just builds up. I mean, I don't remember the last day I didn't, or last time I didn't not. I don't remember the last time I took like a week off from not exercising in general. Like whenever I can, I usually am, and it's not only to look good, feel good, but it is like to kind of de-stress, like take that off. Like
Yeah, I think you're right, Sam, in that, there's this tension and, so much control you have to show at work all the time and being on. And, exercise allows us to feel that in a good way, a more healthy, relaxed way, even if it's, as you would say, pump and iron. You're a young man. I keep pointing this out only because this show is all about emotional development. And so, you talked about it being a difficult field. You're also having to hold the emotions of family members, of patients themselves. How does that go for you?
I like to say nurses, right? We kind of cope with dark humor. That's the stereotype, right? I would say my job, even on social media, is kind of bring that comedic relief. So if we do have a poor patient outcome, I'm never gonna not time it right because there are times and there are not times. But I usually try and be the comedic relief, class clown, if you will, unit clown. I'm trying to bring spirits high when they need a little morale boost. I think I am there for the patient before they go to sleep, talking to them as they drift off, right? Just being that friendly face before you see gives me a lot of closure and allows me to know that hey, like they know they're in good hands and they saw a smiling, blue-eyed face before they went to bed.
Ah, the American dream.
That's all you can.
What do you get training in patient support, in communication? A lot of nurses are young. They haven't learned that stuff themselves.
I didn't really have any training. I kind of, I kind of taught myself and kind of developed my own routine when asking the questions, the normal, like, how are you? What are we doing? Allergies, stuff like that. And I think, just being able to talk also helps. It's like, I mean, if you're an introvert, you're not going to make it. You just can't. You have to be able to communicate.
Is there a is there a field where nurses who are more introverted, we'll say in medicine, if you get there and you're like, holy shit, you go to pathology or radiology as a doctor? Are there fields that nurses end up in?
Yeah, either you're dealing with the crazies on neuro ICU, you don't have to talk to them,
Right.
or yeah, you
I
get
have
it.
one of my patients, Sam, is a bedside nurse and she's in NP school now, but she likes working in the ICU because I quote, the patients can't talk.
They're
And so I
intubated.
didn't think about that.
Exactly. There are those fields where the patients are they can't bother you for call lights, they can't bother you for ice in their water, and I think that's where those introverted nurses usually end up in.
You talked about you being the class clown of the unit, the Patch Adams of the unit, but you won't know that reference either. And so Robin Williams movie, he was
I know that is.
God man,
Wait,
this is a real Gen Z millennial headbutt we're having, and I like it. I
I
like
have
it.
seen Patch Williams, actually. Is he the doctor?
Patch Adams is Robin Williams, who was the genie in Aladdin.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He was okay. Okay, I was gonna say if you don't know who Robin Williams is, I think we have a separate problem. But
Was he a doctor, Patch
he's a
Adams? Is that what
doctor.
I've seen
He's a
movies.
medical
I've seen
student, and
the
then becomes a doctor. He
Yep,
does all this humor with
yep.
cancer kids and all this
I've seen
stuff.
the
Yes.
movie.
So
Seen the
you are
movie.
the Patch Adams of your unit.
Yes.
I'm actually going to spiral that a little bit. So we know that the music in the operating room is very specific. So do
Yeah,
you ever take control of the music when the moment's needed? And what are your
absolutely.
go-tos?
Well, it depends what surgery we're in. We have surgeons that prefer the 70s. Most of the ortho guys are rap. They love their hip hop, and that's where I thrive in. Neuro is more of like a chill house music type of thing. And then I'm trying to think, usually OBGYN is very, very girly, very like teen pop girly.
It's
And
just straight Taylor Swift over and
yeah,
over.
and then some of the ENT guys, nothing. Colorectal, some of the colorectal surgeons, they don't want anything play. So I know. I know. So for the ortho and the neuro, I usually step in if needed. And
And you've earned that green light. Do all nurses have that? Have they earned the
you gotta earn
aux
it.
cord privileges?
Yeah, with specifically with two surgeons I can think of. I've been able to you know, get on their good side. One orthopedic, one neuro. Trying to hold conversations for a year now. I finally made it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Right. You got it. It's kind of like the asking questions. It's like, got to pick a really universally beloved song, at the beginning. Maybe you start with like an I'm sorry, Miss Jackson or something everyone's going to
That's a good
love. And
one. That's a good
then
one.
you get, I was just thinking what might go over well in the Outcast would go over pretty well. I feel like in the
I love
overall,
Billy
in
Bragg.
the OR in general. 1 year in your career, have you had any cases that have stuck with you?
Yes, for good and for bad. So I'll do one of each. The one of the best ones I've ever seen, and it's in general, it's a nerve simulator placed in the brain for people with tremors and Parkinson's. And I have seen that, and being able to see the patients come into the operating room with I mean, pretty severe tremors, and whether it be Parkinson's or just tremors in general, you know, it's about a 3.5 hour procedure, and patients awake for 75% of it, because they have to be like, do you feel this? Can you show exactly? And although they're pretty heavily sedated, the fact that their brain is open and the surgeon is running a rod with a simulator through them all the way down to here, crazy. I mean, that is one of the most rewarding surgeries I've ever seen. And they're done. It's like changing. It truly is. And then the ones that stick with me, I can think of it one in particular. We had a lady, Haitian Creole, come in with an ectopic pregnancy, and she didn't speak a lick of English. and we had to sprint her to the OR. I think we threw like 10 units of blood, 9 plasma, and she did live. She did, but that was like a 5.5 procedure. It was a long procedure, and honestly, there were times I was getting a little nervous. Anesthesia was, they're sprinting. You have 2 anesthesiologists, a CRNA in there, all spiking IVs. It's go, go, go. That was intense.
Yeah, Sam, it's really interesting. One, you hear guys, if you're thinking about the mind of the operating room, people who go into surgery fields, they want to help now. They want it to work. They want to say that they can make a huge difference in outcomes. And yeah, deep brain stimulators are a great example of like, I put this thing in and the person's life is going to change. For those of you therapists in the crowd, we do not have that blessing. So it's a little different than that, Sammy boy. True, Sam. I mean, the idea that you know that surgeons or anesthesiologists are sprinting is not a good thing. You do not want that to be the case in your procedure. And actually, Sam, just to reflect on this, the last two heroes to come on before you have been teachers, male teachers, and police. Some of their biggest moments have been when the language barrier existed and how to connect in the course of a language barrier and cultural differences. And so I think that's really nice for you to, reflect on a situation where that person probably had some fear coming in. Obviously, she was very sick, some skepticism about the healthcare system. And so for you all to be able to do such good work, I'm sure made a huge, huge difference for her.
Absolutely. I'm just glad that she was able to have a good outcome as compared to some of the others we've had.
Of course. Of course. So let's dive into a little more of that social media world you live in, Sam. So Sam has a big platform outside of his Murse Sam persona and also the nursing. How do you go about, when you're making posts and looking to connect with your audience, how do you go about navigating some of the more emotionally challenging stuff?
Yeah, I've gotten ridiculed pretty hard for my social media presence by the fraternity. I'm the type of person that I don't really care what you have to say. I'm gonna do what I think is best for me. And honestly, the main account that I've had countless, DMs, videos made like about me. Like I think I've saved a couple lives in that aspect. I try and make relatable, emotionally available content, right? Show that guys can be vulnerable. I think that's important because there's the stereotypes again, right? Men have to be stuck up, you just basically mules that don't show any type of emotion. And I think me kind of trying to break down that barrier is what's really been able to help.
That is not common for young men to have that attitude, to feel comfortable going there. And like you said, some of your boys, and even just a couple of years ago, and obviously we pray that men from ages 21 through 27 show a proper emotional growth. Do you think you had to develop that? You think you might have just gotten lucky with good parents? What do you think has given you the ability to mature maybe ahead of schedule?
Parents played a huge role in this. I think they were able to raise me right, show me the right way to think. And, given that my mom is an NP, right? A nurse, she always, taught me that emotion is okay. It's good to express emotion. And I think, also a little bit of luck plays into that as well, because you can't come out the womb knowing to be emotional. But yeah, I think there's, I think it's just an amazing thing to be able to show emotion and, be thankful, be sad, be happy when the times are appropriate. And I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, especially for you growing up in the Midwest, that where a lot of that gets pushed out, especially amongst men. We talk about the audience of this show, Sam, being emotionally constipated Midwest frat boys. Is our general. I appreciate you joining me in the fight, my man.
Absolutely.
You talked about some positive, really positive messages you've gotten from people about how helpful you've been and open up their worlds. What about the negative, comments, the criticism? I know it comes with your level of presence, and how do you deal with it?
Again, it's more of a, for better or for worse, I have that kind of like a middle finger attitude to those people, right? I kind of think if they aren't going to support me, they're probably miserable in their own minds because I don't understand the reason for internet hate. There's no reason. You have to just be insecure in your own self, jealous, something. because to just purposely be senile to someone who is obviously trying to make a difference in the world just doesn't make any sense to me. And so I also believe in karma and, clearly something's not going right in their life. And, if they need to take it out on me, and so be it. I'm not going to get butthurt about it. It's just engagement at the end of the day.
Well, hey, it drives numbers, or as we say on the show, numbies, Sam. We're a big numbies based podcast. You touched on a few really important emotional themes there. Projection, hurt people, right? And that like we need to know ourselves that if somebody does something that seems cruel, that it likely doesn't have anything to do with us. Like why take personally this comment that doesn't really seem to make any sense? And Sam, you're right. I try to ask people and my patients and myself that people who are frustrating, people who are mean, people who suck generally live sucky lives. And so we don't necessarily need to entertain that, because if we can remember, what, this person's a person, they've had their own shit, whatever. If that's how they get their jollies, then it's probably hard to think that they're really a happy or content person.
Exactly.
I could see you being a kill 'em with kindness in the replies type. You ever get in there?
Oh, absolutely. I post on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. I think I'm about to start posting on Facebook too, which is crazy. Yeah,
Whoa.
I usually, depending on what they say, I'm usually able to kind of come up with a witty comeback. For the most part, it's filmed with kindness. There are a couple times how depending on how severe the comment is, I'll just be rude back. I usually it's filmed with kindness. Even in real life, like when a patient's being mean to me, I'll just be like, I'm just overly kind.
Yeah. It's that retail. Did you ever work retail as a kid?
Never.
Oh, that's where you learn to kill them with kindness. They're yelling at you and like, yes, man, let's get on that right away. I learned that a whole lot working in the pharmacy for a lot of years. Yeah, Sam, you're right. It's the idea of approaching with kindness and leading with empathy is something we're working on in this world. And obviously, I think it's cool that you're harnessing that and modeling that for your audience. What's the funniest interaction you've had on social media in your time?
Funniest interaction I've had on social media. I think, I mean, funniest because I'm gonna tell you the funniest because I don't even know how it happened. I posted a video, my most viral video I've ever made, 2022, 2021, and it was me standing in front of my mirror downstairs, talking to my camera, asking if anyone had symptoms relating to COVID, right? That video got 11 or 12 million views, got me on NBC Nightly News, Inside Edition, and numerous online articles. I don't know how in the world that was that made no sense.
Yeah, we'll need to cut it in and throw it in here because I'm not. There must have been. You must have been having a good hair day or something. I mean, what?
Something. I'll tell you what, Steven, I still don't know how it happened.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. Congrats. So let's talk a little bit more in depth about the emotional well-being of nurses. What do you think when it comes to the well-being of you and your peers? What are some of the biggest challenges that you notice?
I think some of the biggest challenges is, like we talked about earlier, being able to kind of this like try and feel emotion when you're so desensitized. I think again, stress. I think stress is a huge part in any nursing job. We know our nurses work so hard and usually don't get the recognition they need. And a lot of the responsibility does fall on the nurses. And I think the stress and the emotional wear and tear of the families, the patients calling a million times, I think that is probably the biggest struggles that we as nurses all face.
Right. It's a very fine line to walk, which is showing empathy while also not getting too attached, like separating at the end of the workday. All of these things in healthcare are pretty tough. We talk about in healthcare not necessarily having the time to process situations in the moment. Do you know? This is a great question. Do you know if you're having a tough time or you need help? Is there a pathway that you can follow in the hospital to get support?
Yes, but it's not advertised as real as like it's not advertised as big as I wish it would be. There is a path, but it's not ever really talked about outside of orientation.
Yeah, that's wild, Sam. What does it look like? And like you said, it's not as advertised as it would like you'd like it to be. What would you like to see different?
A more humanistic approach to it. I think we're supposed to email HR, and depending on when HR sees that, they'll be able to send us or let us talk to a counselor. And I think more, I would just prefer a real human on human interaction other than an email of me sending, because at the end of the day, if I'm typing an email, I mean, it really must have bothered me. And by the time you see me, I'm probably going to be like over it because that's what we're taught to do.
It's really impressive, Sam. Again, police, fire, they have a route. You do this, you have peer support. If you need a professional, it's all very above board and common. And I agree with you, Sam, in healthcare, you're on your own, man. Like, even in psychiatry training, you're supposed to see a therapist to be a therapist. Nobody made that happen for us. You still had to do it yourself. You had to be paying for it. And it's a shame. I mean, inevitably, healthcare is a business. For better or for worse, we understand why they don't want to admit that, being in healthcare could fuck you up because then they got to pay a lot of money to take care of us. And it's sad that that's the obvious reason.
It is. I 100% agree.
You seem to be pretty well adjusted, my dude, and mazel tov to you on that. What advice would you offer to, young nurses like yourself to help build up some of that resilience?
Part of my coping mechanisms was posting on TikTok. And this goes even before I started this job. I think, I started during COVID, and that's how I kind of really dealt with the kind of anxiety and stress I was dealing with during that whole time. I was kind of able to bring it online. So honestly, make a burner account, tweet some random things, get a couple followers. I think, social media, it can be a pretty bad place, but it also can be a pretty rewarding place as well. And if you use it right, you'll build a great community, I mean, great people. And also, work out. Like, I know, yeah, I know especially probably during your residency, you have no time, but try and make time to work out if you can. Get a good support system with your peers because you guys are all emotionally traumatized together, and just talk about it. Go out for drinks or something. Go talk. Just get it off your chest. Rant a little bit.
I found, Sam, that when you're younger, you want to designate an hour and a half for your workout, and the more you get into the world and you get busier, that you just find the time. But like, if you can only do 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, then to be okay with that, to accept
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
this is what I can do today, and I'm prioritizing taking care of myself, even if it doesn't look exactly how I might want it to look. Sam, we are going to finish as we have in the heroes block with just a rapid fire set of mostly funny, maybe a little sweet in there as well. You ready to rock?
Let's do it.
All right. What's the most unexpected item you've ever pulled out of somebody in the operating room?
Well, it was a dog toy. Kong up someone's behind.
What do you think was going on there, young man? You don't want to know. Okay. If you had what is your number one choice for song that you would want in the OR?
If I had to choose one song, it's got to be Headlines by Drake, 2010.
Man, Drake. Okay, got it. On anesthesia, patients can often be half in, half out. What's the funniest thing you've ever heard someone say on anesthesia?
You're going to love this, Stephen. Me and an anesthesiologist, we are putting a patient to sleep. Big, big woman. She loves, and she, for reference, for a part of the story, big black woman. So we're putting her to sleep, and she goes, "I can't wait to dream about two sexy men taking my clothes off. Sexy white men. Let me reiterate, two sexy white men taking my clothes off." And then she
Now, is she
sends
even under anesthesia or is that just her? She just clowning.
that propofol was going right into her.
Yeah, she was a little loose. She was a little loose. I love it. I hope, did you let her know that she said that when she woke up? Oh, you gotta. You
I know
gotta.
we told Packy, but I doubt Packy told her.
That is the humanistic part of nursing, Sammy boy. You can't let somebody go without knowing that they were clowning that hard. I bet
That
she'd
was
have laughed.
that was
If she's
awesome.
if she's what we call our listeners, Sam, KGBs, kinder, gentler bros. If she's a KGB, I hope she knows. I hope she remembers
Me,
that
me
situation.
too. Me too.
What is your go-to snack during a shift?
Depending on what they got out in the lounge, because us nurses, we love to eat. I'm usually a pretty healthy guy. I usually just have a banana.
Yes, good dose of electrolytes and potassium to keep you hydrated. A
Exactly.
Gatorade in fruit form. Do they still in the hospital? I leaned heavily on graham crackers. They still got the coffee station with the saltines and graham crackers and
Yup.
all that. Good. Good.
Saltine, peanut butter cups, graham crackers, they got it all.
Little tiny peanut butter cups,
Yep.
very bad coffee. Okay, good. I'm glad to know that hasn't changed. Is one the thing in your career so far you're the most proud of?
My intellectual growth of the operating room within a single year. From
Yeah, I
knowing
feel like you made
nothing,
big.
huge progress. From knowing nothing to be able to competently hold myself in high stress situations.
Do you feel that you could compare your life? There's a lot of medical TV shows out there, Sam. A lot of movies. What medical TV show do you think is the most accurate?
Uh, Probably Grey's Anatomy, especially for the operating room.
Let me tell you, this is again our generational gap coming through because the answer to this question is and always has been Scrubs. So you got to
I've never seen it.
go bite that off. Go bite it off. I
I need to
promise
see it.
we'll stay in touch. You and I. This is like important to my heart and soul. What do you think is the most common like only nurses will get this kind of joke?
I make these all the time on my TikTok. I think nurses will always understand that we clean up more shit in our lives than anyone else will.
That's
So
awesome. We had Fire Captain Joe who answered the question the same way that there's a surprising amount of shit involved in our jobs.
I can see it. I
And
can see that.
how about that? Nurses and firefighters. That's what we're learning this month, y'all. So, Sam, obviously this has been so great, man. You're awesome, engaging. I want to end just with you've got young men wanting to go into healthcare. Med school is a slog and expensive. So maybe they're thinking about nursing. What would you tell a young man who is considering a nursing career, but maybe hesitant for all the reasons we've discussed?
As much as there are times I want to leave the hospital and never come back. It is a extremely rewarding career, both financially and emotionally, because at the end of the day, you come out of college making a pretty good amount of money for working 36 hours a week. I have 5 days off in a row, as we talked about,
Oh yeah.
and full time. I could be on vacation right now, and that wouldn't even be an issue. No PTO to use. The hours suck while you're in them, but are great outside of it. You meet a lot of great like-minded individuals, and the avenues you can take from nurse is just astronomical. You can do anything with this degree in healthcare.
Yeah, Sam, let me tell you, 312s is not fun, like you said, while you're in it, but no shame on nurses, man. Nursing schedules rock. I mean, you get like you said, you can string together a week without taking PTO. You can string together long days, and of course, those shifts are tough, but it does give you the opportunity to live a pretty cool life if you want to. Travel nursing is big these days, and like you said, the flexibility, to do different stuff in your career, which I hope you take advantage of. But Sam, you were not traveling. Thank you for joining us from clearly your childhood bedroom.
Yes, I'm
Do
still
you want to
here.
show off any of those medals back behind you? What were you winning back in the day, homeboy?
Just a bunch of basketball. You got a news article about me in the bottom right corner. Basketball medals, and
Is that
then
Greenfield High School hoops? Like, what are we talking
that's
about?
Greenfield. Yeah, you're looking at the alma mater, Greenfield Central, baby.
Let's go. Suburb outside of Indianapolis, everybody. So thank you, Sam. Hey, tell the people where they can find you on the socials.
Guys, you guys can find me everywhere. Sam22Hunt, that's the main account, and then Murse Sam is TikTok, and Murse Sam22 is my Instagram.
When you look up the word Murse, which is how I found Sam, he's one of the first things to come up on Instagram. So
Great.
I'm glad we were able to connect, Sam.
You're
I said 10 o'clock Eastern, or you said we got to go because you got a hoop, man. Score some points for me and go Pacers. I'm gonna say, as long as you root for the Nuggets, I can pull for the Pacers. But
Hey, I'm a big nut. Hey, let's get Shay out of here. Time for him to
let's
go.
get them. Yeah. All right, brother. Have a good day. Thanks again.
Thank you, Steven.
All right, fellas, it's that time of the show again where we shine a light on a true bro of their time who embodies the kind of honest, vulnerable, and impactful masculinity we celebrate here on the pod. Today, we're introducing a true literary giant whose compassion extended far beyond the page and into the lives of those most in need during a tumultuous time in American history. The one and only Walt Whitman. His dedication to care and his unflinching portrayal of the human experience make him a true Bromotions Hall of Famer. Walt Whitman was born May 31st, 1819, making him our third oldest Bromotions Hall of Fame inductee this year. Free t-shirt to whoever comments first on who our oldest two are. Hometown of West Hills, Long Island, New York, the son of Walt Whitman Sr., a carpenter and a farmer, and Louisa Van Velser Whitman. Whitman, as it was in the early 1800s at that time, and on a farm, had a relatively informal education, largely self-taught through voracious reading. He worked various jobs, including as a printer's apprentice and a school teacher, developing a deep connection to the common man. His early experiences instilled in him a strong sense of empathy and a belief in the inherent worth of every individual. Whitman's best known for his groundbreaking poetry collection, Leaves of Grass, that was first published in 1855, which celebrated the body, the individual, and the democratic spirit. And he continued to revise and expand that work throughout life. That Leaves of Grass was actually quite controversial when it first came out and ended up being known as something that we all learned about in school. He had this innovative style, free verse poetry, and his embrace of diverse voices and experiences was revolutionary for its time, became a significant figure in American history and influencing generations of poets to come. While not explicitly a mental health friendly time, so he couldn't really advocate for mental health, his poetry, though, did as much as we could expect, grappled with tough themes like loneliness, mortality, and the complexes of the human psyche with honesty and vulnerability for his time. And his willingness to explore the full spectrum of human emotion resonated deeply with his readers and speaks to why he's become so influential. But why today? Why the BHoF today? So during the American Civil War, Whitman volunteered as a nurse in Washington, D.C., spent countless hours tending to wounded soldiers, offering not just physical care, but also emotional support, helping them write letters, and simply being a comforting presence. Selfless dedication to alleviating suffering is a profound act of philanthropy and speaks volumes about his character. He's published a book later with his accounts of the war. We'll talk about that in our recommendations at the end. Here's a short clip of being read on behalf of Walt Whitman in terms of his experience in the war.
The released prisoners of war are now coming up from the southern prisons. The sight is worse than any sight of battlefields or any collections of wounded, even the bloodiest. There was one large boatload of several hundreds brought to Annapolis, and out of the whole number, only 3 individuals were able to walk from the boat. The rest were carried ashore and laid down. Can those be men? Those little, livid brown, ash-streaked, monkey-looking dwarfs? Are they really not mummied, dwindled corpses?
Yeah, so you hear there a very real account of what was and still is the bloodiest and most deadly war in American history. What a poignant time to honor the intersection of nurses and military vets, as we'll transition this episode from nurses to military vets next week. And so thanks, Walt Whitman. His legacy here, of course, extending far beyond his poetry and his ability to paint a beautiful picture about the complexity of humanity in an empathetic and kind way. He really embodies what we shoot for in our Bromotions Hall of Fame candidates, and let's all strive to use that same kindness in our own lives. All right, y'all, we'll be back to wrap up with our recs and a goodbye after this. All right, fellas, let's wrap up the show. Another big thanks to Murse Sam Hunt for giving us his time today and talking all about the life of being a nurse in today's day and age. So for your reading list, I recommend Walt Whitman's Civil War, which was edited by Walter Lowenfels. This is a collection of essays by Whitman during his time serving as a nurse during the Civil War, touching on the immense suffering and a super powerful perspective on empathy and the human capacity for care during a time when, families family was fighting family, and things were obviously very intense here in America. Because our young buck, Murse Sam, had never seen the TV show Scrubs, that is absolutely our TV recommendation this week. While hilarious, candid, and beautifully done, often touches on the emotional realities of working in the medical field, showing us the humanity behind the profession. If you've listened to this show, you know it's that show is the reason I went into medicine, and that our guy Bill Lawrence, who is the executive producer of that show, is one of our BHoF inductees. And for movie night, I suggest The Social Network. As we started the show talking about hustle culture, Mark Zuckerberg and those guys are such a great example of how hustle culture can get away from us and really have us lose touch with the things that are important for us. That ambition and drive, seen as a good thing, is not always a good thing, and what it can cost us. So before we sign off this week, I want to let you know that our next episode will not be out on Wednesday. It's going to be coming out this Monday on Memorial Day. I had the honor of interviewing Mark Messina, who is a military vet himself, but also one of the co-founders of a mobile app coming out on Memorial Day called the Quick Response Force Up, or QRF Up app. Now, this is a mobile crisis app designed for first responders. So if they're in a crisis, they can use this app to quickly get on the line with a therapist and help navigate the situation, even having people come in person to support if need be. Super cool conversation, cool app that's going to be a great resource for military veterans, first responders, and people we've talked to during this Heroes Appreciation Month. So really excited to end the month with that. As always, we'd love to get feedback from you. Leave us a review and whatnot. Until then, take care of yourselves, and remember, let's all be kinder and gentler out there in the world as best we can. Peace.